Oops.
Okay, I'll share my screen
Mm-hmm.
and then pause the recording. Okay.
See the chat.
And now the chat part.
Yeah, you see the three dots there at the
Mhm.
bottom?
Okay.
And there is this attendees can chat with, and you need to toggle so everyone.
Oh, this one I don't see. Okay, let me check. Because when I'm sharing the screen, it just gives me, maybe I will stop sharing for a moment.
Okay.
And now three dots, and then it should be reset to default. So that's not pause the recording.
It's the three dots in the chat. So when you open the chat window,
Oh, okay, I see. Let me have a look. Where is the chat? Here.
so there's
And
three dots in the text.
attendees can chat with everyone,
Everyone,
right?
yeah. I don't know
Okay.
why, for some reason, they just disable it by default. And also, one thing I learned yesterday, which is kind of strange, is that when you copy paste something in the chat, people can't copy it. So if there's any text in the chat, you can't copy it out of there, which is kind of weird.
Okay, let me check. Okay, so welcome in today's session. Today's a third day of the webinar content that we prepared for you. So we will focus on the ACC Connect with the low-code and no-code software. This presentation has been prepared in contact with the Integration Solution Engineers team. So without the further delay, let's jump to the session. So first of all, a couple of words from my side. My name is Dariusz Kiszka. I'm a senior partner optimization specialist. Have been working in the industry over 10 years now. So I started as a structural engineer. And when joining the Autodesk, I have joined the technical support for the enterprise customers. Later, I was an implementation consultant. And now my main focus is to help our partners to provide the best-in-class consulting services. So today with me is also Rafał Lewandowski that will help us with the chat. Please feel free to drop any message on the chat or in the Q&A box, and he will be able also to help. Rafał, would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Just quickly, hey everyone, my name is Rafał Lewandowski, similar as Dariusz, more than 10 years of experience in the industry. Also starting as a support consultant at Autodesk more than 6 years ago. Currently as an implementation consultant, working also in name accounts, the biggest accounts that we are collaborating. And yeah, fully focused on automations as Dariusz now, working with low code, no code environment as well. So happy to bring this topic to you a little bit today and answer all your questions. We could kick this off.
Perfect. Hey. Thank you, Rafał. Okay, so as mentioned before, this presentation has been prepared in collaboration with the ISE team. Currently, we have 3 people in that team. We have Alice Adelman, Benki Galinki, and Sopat Sam. All of them are located in America, so it's quite difficult for them to join to this session. But similar session will be also launched in the America time zone. And let's jump to the agenda. So we have 4 main topics, and each of them has a lot of subcategories. But firstly, we'll focus on the REST API overview. Then we will go to ACC Connect platform to have an overview to see how to navigate there. And afterward, we'll jump more into the hands-on session. So how to create the connection within the Worka tool, what are the difference between connections and connector there in terms of the naming convention. And also we will jump into building some ACC Connect recipes. So let's start with the REST API basics. What is exactly the API? So API stands for Application Programming Interface, and as its core is the way to connect 2 programs to communicate with each other without having to share any internal code or any proprietary technology. So when 2 systems like websites, application, and smartphones communicate through the API, we say they are integrated. And in any integration, we have always 2 sides. As you see on the right-hand side, there's a chart when you connect your application through the internet. And this API is basically the protocol that enables you to communicate between your application and also the server that is connected to the database within our Autodesk Construction Cloud. On one side, there is a server. In our case, it's Autodesk Construction Cloud that contains the core code, databases, some technology behind, and it also provides the API for the applications for Autodesk Build, Docs, Takeoff, and building connected. It is helpful to think of the API as just another program running on that server, waiting for other systems to connect or request the data. On the other side, you have a client. And this is a separate program, often created using Autodesk Platform Services, that knows how to request and work with that data, either at the direction of the user or through the automated workflow, like one created with Autodesk Construction Cloud. So when one system pulls the data from the other, the data provider, in this case Autodesk Construction Cloud, is the server, and the system requesting the data is your application or integration, and we call it a client. Okay, let's walk through an example. So imagine the Autodesk Construction Cloud Connect is making the request to get or retrieve data of the company, for example, the company data from the Autodesk Construction Cloud. Your app sends this request to the resource server. And as an analogy to the restaurant, it wouldn't just walk into the restaurant and order something from the kitchen. And you want to start cooking your food on your own, right? So that would violate so many health codes and create chaos. And similarly, in Autodesk Construction Cloud, it doesn't allow users to access the core code and data directly. That would create security and legal issues. Instead, you place an order through the waiter, and the waiter is like the API, passing the request from the client, so from your side, into the kitchen, to the server, and bringing back the results. The client makes a request through the API, just like placing an order with the waiter, and the waiter or API delivers the request back to the server. Then the server gets the data that fulfills the request, and the API returns the data to the client. And just the waiter brings your meal to the table. Once the data is delivered, the client can do what it wants with it, insert it into a report, pass it to another system, just like a patron that can eat their food, take it away, or share it with the other people. Okay, so when we think about the Autodesk Platform Services, what is it exactly? APS is the platform for developers to build solutions in the cloud that allows you to build custom solutions to meet your specific needs or business goals. The way these custom solutions tie into the platform is through our growing ecosystem of web services and application programming interfaces, or APIs. These services accelerate app development, letting you extend the users of your Autodesk tools, like Building Connected, into another third-party applications. This way, your API and services can be combined with those that are with the third-party software systems that you already have. So you can connect your data, break it down into the silos. Like in other words, we connect to our servers from the backend side using the APIs to create any sort of automation workflows, integrations with the other softwares. Going back to our restaurant analogy, APS is like the kitchen, staff, and tools that make the food possible. Think of it like a burger restaurant. The burgers represent the different API endpoints, like account admin, issues, documents, forms, etc. And the ingredients are the data fields within each data object. Each API dish is made up of the ingredient from the different databases, all prepared and ready to be served when it is ordered. And meanwhile, the APS kitchen staff ensures that all the ingredients are prepared and ready to assemble into the burger, or the API response when it is ordered. Okay, so now let's jump into the custom integration. So when you are creating a custom integration, the very first step is to register your application in Autodesk Platform Services. So here in the screenshot, we can see the screenshot from the APS platform, and the small one on the right-hand side is from our Autodesk Construction Cloud. So the app registration, essentially, we need to create an identity for our software application by registering it in APS platform first. And then we need to also connect this solution to our ACC so that the user is validated. And first, we will create a new application in the APS. Here's what the process looks like. So first, you need to go to the APS platform and navigate to My Applications on the top right menu. And then we hit Create Application using the traditional web application. And we will name it through like the custom name so that we are aware which application was created. and the same application will later link it within ACC Connect. So there are a couple of information that needs to be added there. So we need to define the grant type, such as authorization core or client credentials. We'll also need to provide the callback URL. And the callback URL is really important because in some cases, your app will hand over part of the authentication flow to APS. So the callback URL tells the APS where to send the users after they complete the Autodesk login flow. For example, if you are integrating with Workato, you will use the Workato callback URL that tells Autodesk to redirect the user back to Workato once the login is completed. And finally, we will also specify the APIs in your integration that we will use. So when we register the app, the APS generates the client ID and client secret. We can see it here on the left-hand side. Think of it like your credentials, right? So your client ID is your ID of the application, and client secret is your password for your application. So let's jump now into the APS platform. I just navigate to the aps.autodesk.com. Therefore, maybe if you can also drop some links in the chat, that would be helpful from time to time. If you see that, that would also help the participants. I just shared the link in the chat for now. So what we need to do is, first of all, sign in to our APS platform. And afterwards, we will navigate to My Applications. So we enter to the application menu. As you see, I have quite a lot of applications already created, and we will create a new application, hitting the button Create App. As mentioned before, we will use the traditional web app. I can name it, for example, DK ACC Connect. So I know that I'm connecting to the ACC Connect platform. And once the application is generated, it generates for me the client ID, client secret. I can also add some additional description. We can use also the different callback if that is needed. And we can also see what kind of different types of APIs are available. I should potentially also restrict it on the application registration part, which APIs will be used and which of them won't be used in my app. So sometimes if you want to restrict your application to use, for example, only recap APIs or only tandem data, then you can also navigate and select only specific API types. Okay, so this one we will come back to that in a moment. And first of all, let's have a look on how we connect this application to our Autodesk Construction Cloud. So this is really important.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. When you're sharing links, please make sure that you share them with everyone. So in Zoom, when you're typing in some text, you can choose whether it should be addressed to everyone or to just the host and panelists.
Oh, okay, I see. I will just put it one more time. I hope that this way you will have a link.
Thank you.
Okay, so one more time, like going to our APS platform, we navigate to Create My Application. We input the name of the application, and once the application is registered, we will see that we have client ID and client secret. Now, the next step is to connect this application to our Autodesk Construction Cloud, and this is done through the account admin. So we connect our application to the whole hub with all of the projects inside on the account admin level. In a nutshell, you grant the access to your project data, to your account data, to that specific application. And with that, we navigate to the account admin, we go to custom integrations, and we hit Add Custom Integration button. We'll do it now live so that we can go through the same process. So I navigate to Autodesk Construction Cloud, the account admin, navigate to the custom integrations. Again, as you see, I have a lot of custom integrations already added. So I add the new one, right? So I select the Add Custom Application. In this case, I need to provide this client ID that has been registered in APS. So I navigate back to the APS and I copy the client ID. I'm pasting it back to our ACC Cloud, and I put the name, this is my DK ACC Connect. Once I add it, it will create a link between my Autodesk Construction Cloud and the APS integration. So as we actually perform this step, so we copy this client ID into our Autodesk Platform Services client ID field. We add the name to the integration, And with that, we create the collaboration between our application from the registered in the Autodesk Platform Services and our Autodesk Construction Cloud. So now APS knows who the app is because of the client ID and client secret, and the account hub knows that the application has permission to access the data for that specific hub, right? So we will access the data for the account and also for all of the projects located on that account. Okay, now we will talk about the authentication and authorization part. So when creating the authorization calls that validates your integration and allow you to access the data. So as a first step, any API integration is to validate the user, to provide the authentication and authorization. This process verifies that the app is making the request, who is the part of this request, if we have the right permissions to the data, etc. Oh, I see that there is some hand raised. Maybe checking if there's something in the chat. Okay, it's too fast, right? So let me just navigate back one more time to the account admin. Maybe let's give a couple of minutes for everyone to log in and register the integration. Maybe you can give me the thumbs up once you are ready for the next chapter. Either in the chat comment or just within the thumbs up. Okay, I see that some thumbs up are raised. Okay, perfect. So coming back to the authentication part. So this process verifies that the app is making the request, like who is the person that makes the request and if the application has the right permission. So think of it like the restaurant again. You can just walk into the kitchen and start cooking whatever you want. First, you need to order it from the menu, and then the kitchen must have the right ingredients and tools to prepare it. And similarly, the kitchen won't just make food for anyone walking by. You need to be a customer inside the restaurant. And that's what the authorization process is about. It validates both what is being requested and who is making the request. Okay, so to complete the authorization, we needed to provide a client ID and client secret. In other words, your application username and password. And the permission scope defines what your app is allowed to do, like the data that you can read, the data that you can modify, or we call it write, or access the specific part of the accounts and projects. So on the right-hand side, you can see different examples of the scope. It is also provided in the APS documentation, and each of them has the right meaning and the description so that you can also familiarize yourself with the different options. I would say that the most common are data read, data write, data create, so to modify and to retrieve the data. And we have also account read, account write to modify more the account admin section of our ACC Construction Cloud. Either we will use the two-leg authentication or three-leg authorization workflow, depending on the API. So it's really depending on which burger you request from the restaurant, right? If you want to get the issues from the project, it will either take the two-leg or three-leg authentication. And it is also included in the documentation process. So let's dive into these two-leg and three-leg authentication methods as they are a bit different from each other. It can be a bit complex topic at the very beginning. So I will break it down carefully. The Autodesk Construction Cloud supports both types of authentication, but not all API endpoints support both. This can sometimes create some confusion around where to use two-leg authentication, when to use the three-leg authentication. But maybe let's first focus on the difference, and then we will jump into the APS documentation to see how we can read which API requires each type of it. So the main difference when it comes to the number of parties involved, in two-leg authentication, there are two main parties. So we have the server, which is Autodesk Platform Services, that validates the client credentials, and it issues the access token back to the user. And then this user part or the client part is your application or integration. So in other words, it communicates directly your application with the APS platform. In the three-leg authentication, however, a third party is involved, and this is the user information. So the user needs to validate their credentials to make sure that he can access the right part of dataset located in ACC. So the client application sends the request that is redirected to the user. The user must log in to provide the consent. If the user denies the consent, the process will stop and there will be no token. And if on the other hand, if the consent is granted, the access token is provided, allowing the client to make the API calls. So one more time, in the two-leg authentication, your app sends the request to the APS with its client ID, client secret, what is the scope of the permission scope. The APS validates the credentials and returns the access token. And your app or recipe uses this token to make any other API calls. For example, to retrieve the list of companies, the list of projects, etc. The tokens do expire, so your application will need to request the new token periodically. And this means that your app directly communicates with the APS for authentication, accessing the resources, and the end user is not directly aware of any of this server-to-server communication. So we skip here any user authentication in the two-leg authentication process. Here we have an example of how the request looks. So we are providing the client ID and client secret. Normally they are encoded in the base 64 encoded. If we have a look a bit closer into the documentation, we provide it in the header as a client ID and client secret, both encoded in base 64. And depending on what is the token type, so if we want to refresh the token that we already have, if we want to request a new token through the two-leg authentication, we will use the post token request. And maybe let me show you on the in the APS side. So here will be the link in the chat where you can see the API endpoint to request the token. In this case, we need to validate our application with this client ID, client secret. All of them are encoded in base 64. And once we send the request to the server will bring us back the token. We will need to also provide what is the scope for our token. And those scopes we had actually in the previous slides. Let me just jump back. Requesting like if we want to read the data, if we want to modify the data, if we want to create some new buckets, etc. Right? So the important part is also the scope when we provide what this application will be supposed to do with the specific token. Okay, so that was the two-leg authentication part. And now when we jump to the three-leg authentication, it's a bit more complex because it involves also the end user. But let's have a look in this diagram. So your application redirects the user to log in to using his own Autodesk Construction Cloud credentials, and the user grants the consent. So user states with his credentials, yes, it is me. I want to access the data from the server. Then the application exchanges the authorization code along with the client ID and client secret to get the access token. And the token is used for any API calls in the future. It requires the user approval that this data is accessible. So let's assume that, for example, you want to retrieve the data of issues in the project. If you do it through the three-leg token authentication, the server will check to which issues this user has access to. So make sure that you register the application and go through the authentication process with the right user. Normally, it would be some project admin that has access to the majority of data, or even the account admin if we want to also extend its credentials further. So three-leg flows is more secure because it requires the user consent, and most Autodesk APIs require this type of authentication. Except for certain account admin API endpoints, the majority will have this three-leg authentication process. If we have a look on from the diagram from the application perspective, it is actually the common practice with a lot of different third-party systems like SharePoint Online. They also require the three-leg authentication. And most integration workflows, like syncing files between ACC and SharePoint, use two separate three-leg workflows. So for one system, to every three-leg authentication to each system to connect securely. And this is a typical for integrations when the user level data and permissions matter. So when you are building out the integration, keep in mind that the type of authentication required is determined by the API itself. Like you don't have an option to choose it. And some APIs support both two-leg and three-leg authentication, but many will support only one authentication step. And that's why reading the API documentation is so important, because you really need to familiarize yourself with each API endpoint, what are the rules there for authentication and also for creating the API endpoint. So, however, you don't have to stress too much about having too many manual handling of this workflow. The beauty of ACC Connect is that it manages the authentication process for you. And once you use the connector, that it will take care of the authentication process behind the scenes. And the goal today is just to help you to understand the concept so that you can design integrations with confidence. Okay, so now once we have registered the application, we connected that to the Autodesk Construction Cloud. Let's have a look into the API endpoints themselves. So we are ready to make the HTTP request, which is part of the API process. So the HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and it is underlying protocol used to fetch the resources like data, documents, files from the server. Essentially, it's the foundation and most of the data exchange on the web. So when we make the HTTP request, we are sending the message from the client, like a browser on the application, to the server, asking for the specific resource. And each HTTP request has a different key parts. And you can think of it like as a letter. So if someone didn't like the restaurant analogy, I would say that we can also imagine ourselves sending the letter to the server located in the different city. So in this case, when we send this letter, it's like every letter needs to have a stamp, let's say your authentication, so that it can be understood by the post office. And also, like every letter, we need to have the proper format for the post office and for the recipients to understand us what is the structure behind. And here are the key parts of that letter. So we have the request method, which is the type of action that we would like to perform. We have the request URL, so it would be like the address for sending the letter, which gives us the specific API endpoints that we want to call. We have the request header, like the extra instructions such as authentication, what is the content type, format, etc. We have the request parameters, which are the specific questions, specific instructions for the server. And we have also the request body. So when we are sending the letter, normally we want to put information inside that. So it is actual content that we are sending to the server. So let's imagine we want to create the issue. Within the request body, it will be all of these issue details. What is the type of the issue? What is the subtype? To who the issue is assigned to, etc. Okay, so jumping into the HTTP request types, we have 4 main types, maybe 5. So the first one is to get request. So the get request is to retrieve the data from the cloud. And think of it like reading a document, right? Like we want to request a specific document just to read it through our application. The next one is the post request. So this is to create a new resource in the cloud. So we are sending the data to the server to create something new on the server itself. The put and patch are really similar. The mechanism behind is to replace or to update the existing resource. Patch is really similar to put. The only difference is that you're modifying the existing instance partially, like not fully modification, but only partially. And you will see that in our API documentation, there's a lot of patch requests in terms of updating the data that's already within the server. So once again, post is to create a new instance in the server, and put and patch is to modify the existing instance based on some specific GUID information when you can locate the item and modify it. The last one, we have also the delete request. It is to remove the resource from the server. So each of these methods is used in different integration scenarios, depending what you need to do with the data. And Autodesk APIs primarily use the get, post, and patch requests. Sometimes you may also see put and delete. I would say that delete is maybe the least common from all of them. Okay, the next part of the structure of this letter, of this HTTP request, is the request method. So that defines the action. For example, you want to retrieve the information, you send the GET request. But along with this GET request, you need to also know where this letter will be sent. And this will be provided by request URL. This is it tells the server what type of data you want to work with, like getting the list of companies, creating a new issue, retrieving all RFIs from the project. And then we have also the headers. And the headers gives us the information regarding the authorization part. So what is the authorization? It either obtained with via two-leg authentication or three-leg authentication method. It also gives us sometimes the regional preferences, some content type, like what is the content type that is provided within the request itself. And it helps the server to process the request from the user. Next, we have also the parameters. And parameters are used to customize or filter the request. So if you are pulling a list of projects, do you really want to have all of them? Like only maybe the active projects, maybe just 10 projects, maybe 100. And those parameters helps us to define what kind of data we would expect. And there are two types of parameters. So we have URI parameters that are required to input in the URL itself. For example, if we want to access the account ID, we need to already provide it within our address where the letter is sent. And we have also additional parameters. We call it query string parameters. Those are optional, and it allows you to further define your request. So, for example, pulling only active projects or only projects from specific region, etc. Right? So it helps to handle the request more efficient and request the data that are relevant to us. Okay, now we will jump into the request body. So when creating the put, post, or patch method, normally we'll include the request body because we want to tell the server what to modify or tell the server what needs to be created. And within the body, we will define the content, what is sent to the server. So for example, if you are uploading a file, the file content must be in the body. But if you are creating a project, the body might include the project name, the start date and end date of the project, what is the project type, what are any other optional fields like location, project budget, etc. Some of them will be marked with the red star as mandatory fields. So whenever I want to create a new project, I need to provide the project name, and I need to also specify what type of project I'm creating. And some other parameters will be optional. So I could specify what is the start date, what is the end date, but it is not required for the server to process my request. And here we have the example of the HTTP request. We can see here on the first line where the request was sent. So we see that it goes through developer API autodesk.com. It goes through the admin APIs. We need to provide some account ID so that we know where the project will be created on which account. So it is part of the URI parameter. And then we have the post method. We have our authentication token, and we provide the content in the JSON format. And then down below in this, under this design, we have all of the information that we provide to the server to create a project. So we have a sample project, classification production, project value, X amount of dollars, job number for the project, address line, all of the extra parameters that we would like to provide. And once we send it, we always receive the response from the server. So as a response from the server, we will have the information, what is the specific ID of the project as a reference, what are the submitted fields, they are now confirmed and stored on the server, and some auto-generated fields as well. Sometimes it gives us like last sign in, maybe the image URL, some timestamp. Sometimes it gives us extra information regarding the project that has been created. So I would like to jump to the documentation, and we will also have a look on where to find those requests or the APIs within Autodesk Platform Services. So if I navigate, maybe let me navigate first of all to APS services. I can navigate to the documentation on the top side, and I can go to API and SDKs. As you see, we have a lot of different APIs available, not necessarily connected or only focused on Autodesk Construction Cloud. So I would need to filter for Autodesk Construction. I need to search for this Autodesk Construction Cloud APIs. And once I enter here, I can navigate either to the specific section of the references. For example, I want to see the reference of account admin, and it will tell me all of the different requests that are available for Autodesk Construction Cloud. So we have the different sections like account admin, assets, cost management, forms, reviews, etc. So when I navigate, for example, to the account admin and navigate to the section of projects, I can get some project data, I can create some project data, I can modify some data, right? So if I navigate, for example, to the post request, normally at the very top, you will see all of the information about what is this API supposed to do, what would be expected once we send the request. And then it's exactly the same information that we just covered on the slides. So what is the method? So this is a post request with the specific address to send the letter. We will see that our scope required for the token is account right. So I need to get the token with these permissions. And later we have the sections of headers, of URI parameters, and the body structure. So if I go to headers, I can see that mandatory is to provide the authorization with the free leg token. I have the content type that will be provided in JSON. Optionally, I can also use the region if I'm accessing US or EMEA center. Sometimes I can also validate myself providing the user ID if I want later to track it of who has created the project. Within the URI parameters, I need to provide the account ID, and URI parameter will be also visible in the URI address itself. So we'll see that we are going into accounts, and this is my parameter that I need to provide the specific account ID. I need to substitute it to access the hub in ACC to create a new project. So we see that this is exactly the same, right? So the account ID, and then the body structure that we just talked with the name, type, with the predefined list of possible values, some classification. If I want to provide the job number, all of the extra fields without the red star are optional, right? It's not mandatory. If I go down below the request, I can see also what are the responses from the server. So what's the status? And I can also see what is expected body. And it also tells me, okay, what is ID? ID is the GUID of the project. It remains stable, right? What is the classification? So sometimes some of them might be self-explanatory. The other ones, it's also good to check the documentation to see what is the meaning behind the values provided from the server. And if I scroll down below at the very end, each API will always have an example of how to send the request. If I expand it, I will see all of the information provided in my API into the server, and then what is expected server response once the API has been processed by the server. It always sends us back the response with the confirmation. Maybe I can stop here for a moment. Can you give me like the reactions either in the chat or emoji if we follow so far? Okay, I see a lot of thumbs up. That's perfect. So let's jump to the next chapter. The ACC Connect itself, right? So this is, I would say, the main purpose of today's session. And what is the ACC Connect? So it is the Autodesk integration platform that enables you to seamlessly transfer the data between ACC and the third-party applications. So you can see a few examples on the slide here, like the cloud storage platforms, project management tools, some ERP systems, CRMs, some e-signature tools. There are plenty of different scenarios that you can use your integration through the ACC Connect. And what makes the ACC Connect powerful is the flexibility. So instead of one-size-fits-all integration, it lets you build a tailored workflow specific to your business process. For example, you can trigger workflow when a file is uploaded or when the action is completed in another platform. And once configured, these workflows run automatically. So it keeps your system in sync without manual effort. It's like a streamlined, value-driven solution. So when we think about the different key terms that we will use in ACC Connect, so we have the recipe, and recipe we treat it as an automated workflow that span within one application or extends to more applications. So for example, when you create the recipe that detects the new projects in ACC and automatically creates a matching folder in SharePoint. Every recipe has its trigger and then one or more actions to perform to complete the task. Then we have a connector. And connector is a software package that enables you the integration within the specific application using pre-built triggers and actions. So connector, you can think of it like the SDK package that you have all of the tools within that allows you to or helps you to build your recipes. Then we have the connection, and connection is more restricted to or more directed to the authentication details that link your ACC Connect to the external application. A single connection can be reused across multiple recipes. So in short, we have a connector that defines how you interact with the app. You have the connection that defines which app instance you are accessing and with what credentials. And you have also the collaborator or a user that accesses the ACC Connect environment and is able to create or manage the recipes created for your automation workflows. When we think of the licensing part of it, so the base ACC Connect license is $6,060 per year. And this includes the access to the ACC Connect platform itself, unlimited recipes as long as you have at least one application is Autodesk. In total, you have 2 connections, which of those 2, one needs to be in Autodesk. And there is a rate limit of 1 million tasks per connection per month. So it's a really great limit. In most of the workflows, it shouldn't be exceeded. And the admins can access or invite the collaborators to build the workflow. So you can also invite the users to the ACC Connect to help you to build your recipes. You can purchase any additional connection on-prem connectors if needed. With the enterprise business agreement, the pricing follows Autodesk token-based model, so slightly different. And we highly recommend including the technical services, so the ISE team, integration services team, that can support you in scoping and building workflows if needed, and also required hours or estimation to determine after the initial scoping call how much it would take to build a specific workflow or help you or assist you with building the workflow. Okay, so let's go through the interface overview. So the moment that you access the ACC Connect, here's a quick look what the user see. So firstly, you will see how the workspace is laid out, where are the key components like projects, recipes, connections. So let's start with a quick overview to understand how to navigate here. So on the top left navigation panel, we have the workspace name and the admin profile. If you are invited to multiple different workspaces, you can switch between them. As you see, you have some icon with the user to switch between different instances. Below, you have the project sections. So once you access the instance or the workspace in this case, you have the project section, and this is where all of your integrations, recipe are organized within your project. And there is also the access to the dashboard sections, to the community library, some perform tools. And at the bottom down below, you have also the admin workspace. And this panel allows you to add the different users to collaborate together. We'll talk about it in a bit. But this is mostly the administration part of ACC Connect platform. In the middle panel, you can see that we have the list of available projects, and on the right-hand side is the section of that specific project itself. So let's say I create my DK project, and within this DK project, I have my AU class organized in the folders, and within the folders, I can see all of the different recipes. You can filter, sort, and search also those recipes. When you start building them, you will see that they will grow exponentially here. So it's good to also create folders, subfolders, just to keep yourself organized in terms of the different automation workflows that will land in your workspace. Okay, so let me navigate also to the dashboard just to have a quick overview of that. So in the dashboard modules, it gives you the insight into your recipe performance. It tracks your connection health. It allows you to monitor the health of your integrations. And the ACC Connect dashboard, you can control like real-time activity in the form of visualization. So you can see what is the task consumption, how many recipes is successful, how many of them has failed. We can spot any potential issues early, and we can track overall usage and the success rate. And the main components here includes the graph chart or the job graph, which gives you the bird's eye view of how many recipes are executed. We can see also the recipe details table, so where you can drill the data to the specific job to see the error rates, execution trends. You can see also the plan usage, and you can also control the connection overview, so which connector is added to which recipes. So when we navigate to the admin workspace, it's also really quickly just a quick overview to see what you can find here. We have a different personas that might be involved in the process, and there are three main roles in ACC Connect. So we have the operator. Those are the users that maintain and monitor the existing recipes. We have the analyst that helps us to build the recipes, test the recipes, create those automated workflows. And we have also the admins that manages the users and can do all of the previously mentioned tasks. So admin can also give the access to the, to have the access to the broader settings, including what is the workspace profile, what is your subscription plan, what is your authentication, what are the notification emails in case of the failures, in case of the collaborator changes. And this key area is mostly for the governance and collaboration, ensuring that the right people have the right access level. Even though we have these three predefined roles, we can also customize it further per specific task, etc. So if you want to also play around with that and see how you can increase the scope of operator and decrease it, there's also the option to do it within the admin panel. Maybe I will just jump quickly to the tool. So if I navigate to Workato, I'll just give you the link in the chat. First, I need to sign in, of course. And once I'm signed in with my credentials, I navigate to the specific workspace. And I can see on the left-hand side all of my project list. I can join to the community center and see what are the different tools available as well within the ACC Connect, and also the admin workspace. So if I navigate to the admin workspace, I can see who are the collaborators, if I have any pending invitations for the users, what are the different collaborator roles who has been added to the admin, to the ACC Connect workspace. Okay, so let's navigate to create the universal connector first. I think that maybe we can jump from the most difficult part, and then we will see also what are the other functionalities in ACC Connect that allows us to streamline this process. But first of all, to understand how the ACC Connect works, we would need to create the connection and validate it with the specific data center. So let's say we can choose SharePoint, ACC, OneDrive, etc. And for that, we can either use the pre-built connector that is already available in Workato, or if we cannot find any pre-built connector, we can always use the universal connection that is created via HTTP connection. And this allows you to integrate any cloud application. So even if Workato doesn't offer the pre-built connector for specific tool, you can still connect to your application using this approach. And why is it important? So there are two key benefits. Like, first of all, you have much broader access to the APIs. So you are no longer limited like to the applications that are native in Workato. You can build your own integration with the tools that may be unique to your organization or industry. And the second part is the flexibility. So you can perform any custom API calls, including the endpoints, operations that normally are not covered in the pre-configured triggers and actions. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see an example of the HTTP connection. We'll do it in a moment live in ACC Connect. But just to have a high overview of what is included. So we need to give the name to the connection. We define the authentication type. So this is the client using credential grant code. We can see what is the auth token URL taken from the documentation, provide the client ID and client secret from the registered application before. And then with that, we can also define what is the scope of the token that we would like to retrieve from the server. And once it is configured, this connection can be used in multiple recipes to make the authenticated API calls specific for the workflows. When we think about this universal connection and the authentication part of it, so the type of authentication you choose will affect how the connection is set up in Workato. So for Autodesk platform services, we use OAuth 2.0 that can be done in two ways, either through the two-leg or three-leg token, as we talked before. Both of these options are supported in Workato HTTP connector. On the right-hand side, you will see again like the setup screen, which is where you put your auth token, URL, your client ID, client secret, depending on the flow. I see that there is some hand raised. Maybe let's have a look if there is something in the chat. Yes, Ian? Okay. Yeah, let's give it a moment for you to log in. And maybe we can jump also to the service itself. We can, in the meantime, once you log in, I will just create here a new project. So let me just put APS webinar session. I will create a new project on the right-hand side, just using the plus icon. And then within this project, we will also see what kind of parts we can create, right? So if I hit the create button, I can create the recipe, I can create a connection, or I can create a new folder. So let's maybe create a new folder, and I will put it as authentication. And within that folder, what we will do is also to create this HTTP connection. So what I need to do is to navigate to create a connection. And with that, it will generate for me all of the different connectors that are available. We'll talk about in a moment. For us, the most important part is the standard HTTP interface, right? So I will navigate searching for HTTP to see what is the HTTP part. How do we, okay, I see that there are some things in the chat. How do we log in? Yes, so, okay, so normally like you should have access to this ACC Connect like through your companies. If you don't have an access, you can ask for the demo request, or let's say they request the demo of the ACC Connect. No worries if you cannot access today. You can follow the same process after the session as it is recorded, and the recording will be sent afterwards to you. Yes, normally you have the email verification that jumps to your mailbox, and if you haven't received it, maybe just check the spam part, because sometimes it also lands in the spam of your mailbox. Okay, so when creating the HTTP part, I need to specify the name. So let's say that this will be my my cloud connection maybe to ACC, so I will put ACC Cloud. This will be located in the folder authentication. And we can see that the connection type is the cloud one. I can choose a different authentication type. In this case, I will use the auth2 as we mentioned before. And then afterwards, we can use the URL to request the token. So to request the token, we will need to go to the documentation itself. If I navigate to the documentation, there's a specific documentation similar to how we access the APS. We have a similar documentation for the authentication process, where we can input the verification asking for the token. So I will also put this one in the chat in case you would like to follow me in the webinar. I can use this method to request the token with our client credentials part. So if I navigate to the auth2 token, I need to we need to verify or state where this API will be sent, and I need to provide my client ID and client secret. So again, when we navigate to our connection, I need to copy my client ID and input that into my application, and the same with the client secret. So I'm copying the client secret and then providing it into the interface to build the connection. So with that, we will have the information about the client ID, client secret, and later we will be able to get the specific token. The important part here is that our verification is coming with the inside the header of the request, and in the advanced settings, you can see also what are the scopes, and we can also add our scope. Like I will add a couple of them, like data read, for example, data write permission token, data create, for example, data search. There are like different areas that you can provide. If I want to also access the account, I will need to specify account read. If I want to modify something in the account, I will need to provide account write. I'll just put it also in the chat in terms of the tokens. Okay, I see that there's some couple of information in the chat. So the requested resource does not exist. Yeah, this is the link is the link to provide within the interface itself, right? So it's not the link to the website, it's the link to copy and paste. Let me just navigate to the website itself. This is actually the link to the website, right? So if you click this one, you can navigate to the page for the token, but actually the URI of the token itself is the one that we are sending from our application to the server. So it already happens through the process. Okay, let's give a couple of minutes for everyone to follow. I see that there are some messages in the chat that need a bit more time.
There's one pretty interesting question, because I know you have a pretty good exposure. Difference between Power Automate and ACC Connect itself. Not sure if you have a slide or you like to cover this topic, but yeah, there's one.
Sure, we can address this one once, like in the meantime, when people follow. So let me just pull the screen just for everyone to follow this part. Okay, so in terms of the those two, I mean, they are similar, right, in terms of functionality. The main difference here, I would say, is that ACC Connect gives you this option to monitor your projects and access the different connectors that are available within the Workato itself, right? So you have a lot of different options to facilitate creating the recipes, creating the connections to the different data centers. We will talk about it in a bit, like after creating this custom connection. But generally, the idea behind is the same, right? It's another service provider that monitors the different actions, different triggers, and runs the recipe. With the Workato, I would say that it's a bit more elaborated in terms of the tracking of how your recipes are performing. So checking also what are the error handling part here. It gives you a bit more functionality in terms of also programming languages, as under when creating the recipes, you can also use the Ruby programming language. So even though those two tools are similar, I would say that ACC Connect is a bit more elaborated and user-friendly when creating those recipes. Okay, so we are back in the workato page. Okay. Oh, I see that you are blocked from copy and paste from the chat. No worries. Let me have a look if I can fix that part. So, chat settings. Yeah, I don't see any option to enable this option to copy directly from the chat. I mean, if not, you can navigate to the website itself and just provide the same kind of URL address. Yes, the client ID is within the application that we created before, right? So the client ID and client secret, so those two fields, is your kind of ID of your application and password. And if you navigate to your APS platform and you create your application, so going through my applications and then create the application, you will be provided the moment that it is created, referring to client ID and client secret. So you would need to copy this information from here into your connection in ACC Connect. Okay, are there any other questions maybe in the meantime? If you are ready, just give me the thumbs up just to see if we can.
I think it will be worth, Darius, to present because there are some questions about the regions, and now we also enable more than US, AU, and Australia. We have also UK, Japan, India, and other ones. The question is, we need to enable application on the account level, right? So we have this dedicated ACC and BIM 360, the legacy one. Could you maybe show that, because that will explain, I think.
Okay, you mean in the
question.
documentation itself, right?
Not sure if you have that in the documentation, but at least if you go to the account admin in the apps, you need to enable the application, right? The you know what I mean? Yeah, in the apps, right? The custom integration is one thing, but also I think this will answer some question and doubts. What we need to do to enable connection, right?
Yes, we will jump to this one right after this HTTP request. So we will also go through the process of using the pre-configured integrator.
All right.
But yes, within the applications, if you touch this this topic further, like we have also the option to use the pre-built connector and connect to our ACC or workato environment. Okay, I see that there is one more hand raised of to token URL. Okay, so the token, let me have a look. So probably this one. So this one, this URL, you collect from the documentation itself. So if I navigate to this get post token, so in the link in the chat, the last link that I gave you, you can navigate and copy that URL. And once you copy this URL to authentication, get the token, so I can just literally Ctrl+C and paste it in my application. It will connect to the server to retrieve the token. So it will be always the same part, right? Like the client ID, client secret, it comes from our APS. The token URL comes also from the APS, from the documentation itself. We include them in the header. And then in the advanced settings, we can define the different scopes. So we can define like data read, data write, data create, account read, account write, depending which part of APIs we would like to use in the future. And once I have all of those settings in place, I can connect my application. And as you see, the workato, it tells me that the application has been connected, and I will be ready to use the recipes using this standard connection. Okay, any other questions or doubts before we go further? Okay, so going further to the next part, using this universal connection, again, we have a different parts that are that we would need to review. So let's start with breaking it down to the components of the HTTP request. So we have the HTTP request as a GET method to retrieve data from the server. And when we do it successfully, we need the key pieces of information. So we need to specify the request method and URI. In this example, we are using GET method to retrieve the data from the server. And then later we need also the request headers for any additional instructions. We also talked about these request parameters to request the specific instructions, and string parameters also to narrow down the scope of the information that we are requesting. And with that, we can also configure our request using this HTTP connector that we have just created. So let's now see how it is translated by Workato. So firstly, like whenever we create the API endpoint, we need to input the same method that came from the documentation. We input the request URL, any request parameters if needed, and also any request headers with the token, etc. And with that, we can also see how it is linked to the documentation, right? So GET, I need to navigate to the documentation for specific API, input the URL address. Same for the string parameters. I'm searching in the documentation which string parameters I would like to use. For example, to extend list of my projects to 100, I will need to input the specific parameter to increase the limit of the response data. And the same key component of the request headers. So if we have the authentication header, I would need to provide it in the same format as it is stated in the documentation. And in the documentation, it says that it is a bearer and it needs to be obtained either via two-leg or three-leg authentication. And with that, I need to provide the same thing, right? So bearer needs to be here. And then the either two-leg or three-leg token needs to be also provided. So one thing that before we jump further, like one thing to also understand to see how this process is determined, or let's say how to close the loop here. The HTTP request, when it is sent, you will always receive the response from the server. And it's really similar like when you request the food, then the food goes to the kitchen to get prepared, and then you have the response back. So when you make the API call, the server sends the response back, and configuring how you handle that response is critical because it determines how your integration knows whether a call succeeds, fails, or return the data. So let's have a look what kind of information we can see. So within the response from the server, we will always have the response code. In case it is a successful response, it will be 200. If it is some bad response, it will be 400. If you are unauthorized, it's 401. Sometimes you see also when accessing the website that you have error 500. So it's something on the server side. So the server codes gives us the indication if this is a success or a failure. And as a confirmation from the server, you also have the body with a specific structure. And this also you can find in the documentation to see what actual data will be returned from the server. It may include the details like project ID, what's the name of the project, some other attributes, depending on what was requested. So for example, in the chat, I see that someone got the server 400, right? So it means that the request was not formatted properly and gives you like some error. So that gives you also the indication that the error that had been provided it gives the indication of what needs to be fixed. So as we see in the chart, there was some error with the description that the scope is mandatory. So probably when sending this credential or the validation, the user haven't added like the scope for the advanced settings, right? So it gives you like the information that hey, there's an error, the server didn't understand you properly. So therefore, like in this case, Farsad, I think you need to probably add also the scope for the token. In this case, we use the client credential grant, so it should give you like the feedback straight away. We don't need to use any base URL or any additional parameters apart from the ones that we have added. What was the scope? Yeah, the scope is the scope of the token. So when you request, like when you do the authentication process, it's the same as if you send the API. But in this case, you send the API to request the token. And the token may have a different scope. So with a specific token, you can request, my token is to create the data. Let's say I have data create. Or my token can modify or write information on the account administration part, right? So each of them you will also find in the documentation. And if I navigate here to the documentation part, under the scopes in the documentation, you can see the full list of different scopes for the tokens that can be provided. So the scope that we used here was account read, account write, data read, data write. I think those are the main. So account write, account read. And then you can also add there data read, data write, data create. Okay, so when we come back to the responses part, we need to also inform like what would be the type of the response. So normally, typically it's in the JSON format, but sometimes it may be also returned in the plain text, in the binary form, or the data form. And we can also provide the response body schema. So this is important because when Workato receives the response, it doesn't process this response automatically. Like we need to specify what is expected as a data field that later we can use in our next actions. So when building the recipe, the API hasn't been sent yet. The server doesn't know what to expect. So we can also input this expected schema to later use these parameters in the next steps of actions using our recipe. We will use it live later on, so you will see also that in the practice. But in a nutshell, we have our body structure from the documentation of the request, and we can input that response or expected response into our response schema to later reutilize these parameters for the next actions in our recipe. Okay, so when we are configuring the request, again, we need to provide this request method, request headers, request parameters, request body. All of this is from the documentation, right? So I would say that the very first step, if you haven't done it through the last 2 days with the different webinars, you need to really familiarize yourself with the documentation and what kind of parameters, what kind of data you can access, modify, or input into the server. Later, it's all the same structure, so you will really get used to that really fast. But when we have a look into the Workato, we need to also provide the same information in the chunks of information. So we can define what is our method. We need to input what is our request URL from the documentation, what is our request body. Then we can also add different request headers with the key and value pairs. So the key is our authorization and the value is the bearer and token. Okay, so when we configure the request, we need to provide all of the information. And this is what we will do now, like in the hands-on exercise. So the exercise itself is just to get the information from the hub. So once we created the HTTP connection, we'll see how it works as a universal connection. So we can go to the documentation, check what is the list of projects of the ACC Hub, and we will try to retrieve the list of projects. So in the documentation, I will just send you the link in the chat in terms of the documentation. So this one is connected. I can already close that part in ACC Connect. And what we will do now is to build a new recipe. So we are creating some sort of automation workflow. For now, it will be really basic, but we will see how this can be done, right? So first of all, I need to put my recipe name. So my idea is to retrieve projects from specific hub and just hit enter to start. And every recipe has a trigger and action. For now, we use any trigger. For example, I can use a scheduler, but the recipe will be scheduled every 5 minutes. And in the list of actions, I can add my action as the action in the app. And when I navigate to the HTTP request that we have built, I can use my HTTP request. And the request, I will set it up manually here. So I will navigate, set it up manually, just to have all of this information that has been provided on the slides before. For now, you don't need to follow me. This is just to present later, like with the pre-built connection. I think it would be easier. But once again, like for those who really wants to like stay with along with me, what we have here is that I navigate to my folder. In this case, let's say my authentication folder. We created already the connection. So we created the connection as the standard HTTP. And when I navigate, either I can create a new recipe using create recipe button. We need to input the name of the recipe. And now once we have it, we can edit the recipe in the course of actions. So we need to always specify what is the trigger and what are the actions. The trigger, we will use just any trigger, like it would be like a scheduler. So I'm just using in the search app schedule. I use a scheduler trigger, like embedded trigger in ACC Connect. And my action here will be to use, like as you see there, like guided workflow on the top. So I need to use the app. I need to format that as a specific actions. And then once it is set up, I can send the API call. So through this HTTP request, as an example, I can say that I would like to get the projects from Hub. And this will be my request name. So this will be my API that I will be sending. With the setup, we would need to follow the documentation, right? So normally it will be the documentation that refers to the apps. As we start from scratch, we would need to also check how to retrieve the hub ID. And based on this hub ID, so it is a two-step actions. Firstly, I retrieve the hub ID, and then I will get my projects from the hub. So if I navigate to the documentation, I'm selecting the link over here, and I should have it open. We have a lot of step-by-step guides that will guide you through this process. And in getting started, you will see like the tutorial how to get the hub. And in this case, we have the step-by-step tutorial. So before you begin, you need to register the app. This is what we have already done. We have created the connection. It tells me what kind of scope I need. So in this case, I need data create, data read, or data write. Then I can go and find the hub using the HTTP request. So in this case, if I navigate and select the URI of the APIs, I know that this is a get method, and I'm sending it to the server. So when I navigate, I need to choose the method. This is a get method. I need to choose the request URL. Potentially, I could also add some parameters and specify also the response. Let's send it for now as it is. Let's see if that will give us the expected result. I will just test the recipe. And once the recipe is tested, you have a toggle on top when building the recipe. And once you run the test, so one-time action, you can see what has happened, right? So in the trigger, it was triggered on that specific day. And in the actions, you can see what is the status code? So this is 200. I can see any headers coming from the server response. And then in the body, I can see all of the different information in terms of what are the different hubs that I have access to. And with that, I can navigate and going through the response documentation, I can see exactly what is my hub ID. Yes, so this is like the, let's say, pre-step. The other option that you could do it, like potentially skipping that part, is to grab the ID of the hub directly from the account admin, right? So normally the URL also contains like accounts, and then this is the same account ID. So mine starts with 773. If I navigate to my response from the server, I would also see that in the response, I have exactly the same ID of the hub, 773, etc. So in this case, what we have here is, this is like, I would say, the pre-step, but the main step that you would like to use is actually to get the projects from the hub. And this is just to show you like to get projects using the standard HTTP part. Again, I need to set it up manually. We will navigate to the documentation part. So if I navigate to the documentation using the link here, we'll just provide you in a moment. We will see like what is the concept here, right? So I read the documentation. This specific API gives me the list of projects located in the hub. I need to use this URL that is routed through the specific account ID. So in this case, I will need to copy this URL to get the information from the server. And when I navigate to my Workato, I need to paste the same URL. So I need to paste this URL. Potentially, I could use the data from the previous step. If, let's say, I want to I know what is my hub ID, I can just grab it from the project itself, right? So it's coming from the account. I can grab the same part and input it into my account as an account ID. Let's have a look if that would work for us. I will just save this recipe and test it. It might throw me the error, or if everything is okay, it should give me like the response code. And again, like in the body of the request, I have a lot of data there. So it means that I've put my input. This was my GET request. This is my address where the letter is sent. And then as my output, so the feedback from the server, I can see all of the information about the status code and what is the body that has been provided. And this body also should be in line with our documentation. So if I scroll down with the documentation to the response part, I can see what is the response body structure. And I can see that response is structured in the form of pagination and in the form of results. So it's like the array with the ID, name of the project, start date, end date, etc. In this case, it really gives us the overview, what do I expect from the server? And the same data should be provided here. So as you see, it starts with the pagination, gives me the limit, and all of this one is a different projects on our server. Yeah, if the token is not provided, potentially you have some, I'm just looking in the chat. Yeah, if the token is not provided, potentially you have the token scope that is not correct. So you need to again come back to the connection itself and make sure that in your connector you have the right scope for the API request. So this scope is important, right? Because whenever you request something from the APIs, so let's say we are in the API get projects, it tells me that I need to have account read. So this scope needs to be provided to send this request. Yeah, this is just an example to understand like HTTP scope, right? Like what we will be using mostly here is to grab the information from the server using the predefined connector. So in a moment, we will see how Workato automates this process for us. Let me just see the chat. So Maltesh is asking, where did we provide the required parameters like required ID? So the parameters you can provide in multiple ways. Either you can input this. So if I navigate to the request itself, so this one, you can either provide it manually, like inputting the account ID. If not, I can also do it in the other way around. So before it was stated as account ID parameter, and you can also provide it as a part of the. Oh, sorry. So this one, like if I have the account ID provided from the previous steps, I could also grab it from the response. So for now, the response is not configured here. I will need to grab the response in the schema. We'll see that in a moment. But generally, once you provide what is expected response, you can also choose your parameters from the previous steps. So let's say the first step is to get the hubs. The second step, you can connect to the specific hub ID. So let's say if I have some, let's say account ID, I could also create this string to build it when building the URL string. We'll see that in a moment also in the next example. Okay, when we think about the post method, this is really similar part. It's the only part that is adding is the request body. So to provide the body of would be, for example, the user that is added to the hub, etc. I think for the I'm conscious of time, so I think we will skip that part, but it's really similar. We'll see it on the next example. The important part, so the HTTP connector was this universal connector, and it is used only when you cannot find the connector available in ACC Connect. So when we have the predefined connector, that speeds up the whole process, and I think that you will see also the part of the functionality that helps you to standardize, or let's say connect it to the different softwares at the same time. So one more time, as a quick refresher, connector is like the software package. And in ACC Connect, you have a predefined connections that provides you like different triggers, different actions, and it helps you to build your recipe. So when we talk about the pre-built connector, we are referring to the packages like SDK packages tailored for the specific application. And this is a ready-to-use integration available in ACC Connect platform. These connectors allow you to link your ACC Connect with any other software applications that you can see that are listed on the right-hand side. It's quite a lot of them. And what it makes difference, like in terms of the standard HTTP connection and the pre-built connection. So these pre-built connectors, first of all, those are the app-specific integrations. So each connector is tailored to the specific application, like ACC, Cloud, SharePoint, OneDrive, all of the other ones listed on the right-hand side. We have also the specific drop-down support. So we have extra fields that we don't need to really program the things, like using the coding part, but you have also the predefined actions. You have the built-in authentication, which is extremely useful. We'll jump to that in a moment. And we have also the custom API support. So if there is like the specific actions available in the connector, that also helps you to use the interface instead of use the programming language. So when we think about the authentication using the pre-built connector, we can create the connection using the Autodesk Construction Cloud as a pre-built connector. And in this case, it offers us only free-leg authentication. And this means that you would need to log in with your credentials to create such a connection. Be aware that some of the account admin APIs, they support only 2-leg. And in those cases, this universal connection that we have just built will need to be used. In all of the other cases, for the free-leg authentication, the ACC Connect gives you the option to sign in and obtain the token automatically. So let's have a look on the ACC Connect, how it works. If I navigate to my, let me just save this and close. When I navigate back to the folder, I can navigate to create connection. And it will give me the list of all of available connections. So as you see, the list is quite long. I have a lot of different connections. In our case, we will search for Autodesk Construction Cloud. So if I type Autodesk, you will be able to see like Autodesk Construction Cloud as a connector. And when I select this connector, I will input my connector name. So let's say APS demo connector. It will be land in my authentication folder, let's say. And the moment that I connect, it goes through the login process. So as I'm already signing with my credentials, just sign me in automatically. But it also tells me like who is the user that has been signing, right? So in this case, that's all that I needed to do to create a connection. So you see already like what is the speed here in comparison to create a standard HTTP connection. And it is ready to use, right? So it will be constantly refreshing the token for me in the free like authentication, and I can already use it in the recipes. It's quite important because with that, whenever there will be any changes, or let's say I'm changing my credentials, it will throw me the email that, hey, you need to re-sign in here to reestablish the connection. And when I come back to the main folder, I will see that this demo connector is active and it is connected. And that was the first step, right? To create the connection within Workato. When we think about how it is linked to our hub, we will use the application under the account administration. And I also need to switch on or activate the application called Connect for ACC, which basically allows the Workato to get into the data set of the specific hub. And please be mindful that this is a free-like authentication. So still, if you have signed in with your credential, you will be able to see only the hubs that you as a user have access to through the user interface. So the next step that I will need to do is to navigate to my account administrator, to the account admin in ACC. And this time, instead of going to the custom integrations that we have built, I will navigate to the apps, and from the App Store, I can search for Connect for ACC. For me, it's already activated. For you, it would be just to switch it on. So select it and authorize yourself that ACC Connect can access your ACC Cloud. Once it is activated, we will see it also in my apps. So as you see, I have some of my apps activated, and I have also Connect for ACC there. And with that, we established the connection, right? So we created the connector to Workato using free-like authentication. And then in ACC Cloud, in the account admin, we connected that to our hub. With that, the ACC Connect will be able to get access to the dataset located on that ACC hub. Maybe I can stop here just to check if you have a concept of that, if you grasp like the idea behind the pre-built connector. Maybe you can just give me some feedback in the chat or through the emoji. Okay, couple of okays. For now, I see that nothing more in the chat. Yeah, this one with the account ID. Yeah, this one with the HTTP connector, I think that is not that relevant for this session, as we will be mostly using this pre-built connector that takes care of the authentication process for us. Okay, so when we think about the recipe itself, we will also think about how to process the data. So I put it into the 3 different sections. Let's talk first of all on the data input. So in the data input here, we have the different types of the data input. So we can have a trigger data, which is the data incoming from the trigger. So every recipe has a trigger when it starts, right? We can have also the action output. So as we were building different steps, as you see on the right-hand side, of each step, there might be some output. And we can also use this output as an input for the next step. So it is normally provided in the key and value information. And then we will parameterize that and use it for the next steps. We can also do, of course, the manual input if you want to add the data manually, which we tend to avoid. We have also the functions, like for example, give me the time 5 minutes ago, give me the time now, 10 days ago, etc. Lots of different functions available in ACC Connect as it runs on the Ruby programming language on the backend side. We'll talk about the functions in a moment, but also one really interesting concept, we can link the recipes together. So I can create one recipe, even call the other recipe, and it will perform the task, and the output of recipe A would be the input for recipe B. So we can connect those recipes together, especially when we have really complex scenario that we would like to break it down into the different subtasks in the form of separate recipes. Okay, so when working with the data, the ACC Connect automatically parses your API data schema into the dynamic data tree. So here is an example of how this data is visualized. So in the box on the right-hand side, you can see the output from step 1. It tells me like this is account ID, project ID, some document ID, the information that is retrieved when the trigger starts and when new object is added to the project. We can also drag and drop those fields from this data tree into our other action in the recipe. So for example, this display name, I can drag it and drop it into the name of my new document that I would like to upload. And this will be used quite widely. So we will see that running in the example later today. We can also map those data fields, right? So on the left-hand side, what you see is all the fields like pick lists that are associated with the app and the object that you are working with. And for example, if you are using the action create object, you select the account, you will see the field that normally associate with creating the account, like in Microsoft Dynamics, right? So you can drop down the list, select the specific account. No need to provide this account ID that we have done just a moment ago, right? So in this case, it helps us to choose the data already that are retrieved through the pre-configured connector. And on the right-hand side, what we see is the box label data app, and also known as the output data tree, right? So it contains a couple of pick lists that you can expand. Each of these lists contains different data fields, which basically contains the data associated with each field in the source object. So these fields can be used for mapping when dragging and dropping the items into the field on the left-hand side. So you can map the data between the steps using the data fields, which represents the specific field from the previous step. And the fields show their expected input. So for example, when I have a look at the account ID, I see what is the account ID retrieved before, right? So what is expected value of that? And recipe steps are sequentially numbered. So whenever you create different steps, you can always navigate to the specific step number to retrieve the information from that specific step. We'll see it also in a moment in the hands-on activity. In terms of the type of the data, we can have a different input types, right? So we can have a string, like marked as ABC, which is basically the text input. We can have an integer as the whole numbers. We can have a number as a decimal. The object, so we can pass the whole object from one step to another. Some date and date time, some Boolean as true and false statements. And we can also provide, instead of one object, we can provide the array or the list of the different objects. So each of them has a different, it's a different type. And also we need to be careful what we use, right? Because sometimes the application asks us for the input as a text. So in this case, we would need to convert, for example, our date and time input into the text. Okay, in terms of mapping the inputs, it can be static. So I can just input manually the information. It could be this dynamic input that we just had a look before. like a moment ago. So just drag and drop from the previous step, what is the display name for my folder from any other previous step. We can have a combination of mapping. So we could use the blend of static and dynamic values. For example, I want to have my new name for the file. I want to have the previous file name and also the information on when it was uploaded and the last modified time as a other value. So in this case, it gives quite a lot of, you can use a lot of combination to modify the data as your input before the step will take place, right? So before the API is sent, you can also use the combination to prepare the data set for that. And the last one that is really important is using the formulas. So as mentioned before, ACC Connect utilizes the worker tool, when we can also switch the static content into dynamic using programming language. So in terms of those formulas, it's quite a bigger concept here, to be honest, because it is something that Worka2 offers us a lot of different formulas. Normally, when you switch, maybe I will show you like in the ACC Connect. So if I go, for example, to my example, let's say demo recipe or demo step, whenever I'm providing some values, let me just put here parameter. Let's say I want to put any sort of parameters, parameter 1 as my name, and then the value. So I can either type the information as my parameter, but then I could also switch it from the text to formula. So here you have a small different tags. So the moment that I switch it to formula, I'm starting coding, right? So whenever the text I input, the moment that I put some dot and any letter, it will tell me all of the different possibilities that I have here. And that's quite important because with using this dot period, you can have a lot of different combinations that will help you to modify and be more flexible with your input. And these suggestions are based on the data type or field that you are using. So if there is a data field like string, number, or date, automatically selecting the dot, it will tell you the most common formulas that can be used. And this main type of the formulas, it can be any sort of string formulas that help you to work with the text, including the logic with the conditionals. You can have a number formula, so working with the integers, how to convert the numbers, with the different decimal numbers, rounding it up or down. You can also have a date and time formula, so when working with the data calculations and so on. And with that, it also gives you quite a lot of flexibility. Here are a couple of examples. So the most common ones, I just put it in the slide for you to review after the session. But just to roughly touch on it, you can have the split formula that splits your text into the separate strings in the form of the array. If you have some longer string, you want to retrieve the first name of the string or the first text part, you use the first option. You can slice the strings, you can upcase the strings, etc. There's quite a lot of them. You can substitute the specific letters or names into the different names. So in this case, if I substitute J for M, instead of Jean-Marie, it will be Min-Marie, right? So in this case, I can substitute the different parts of the strings. So quite a lot of different possibilities that you can do with the formulas in Worka2 Ruby programming language. It's a lot of them, right? So there are lots of documentations on the Ruby programming language, like the SDK, what kind of different formulas are available and how to modify the input just to fit your expectations. And I would say that the formulas part is quite an extensive topic, and probably after getting used to familiarizing yourself with ACC Connect, with building some sample API endpoints, then you will probably jump into the formulas to adapt your recipe to have more precise input, or let's say the information flow between the ACC Connect steps. Okay, when we jump to the API calls using this ACC connector, so this predefined connector, This is when the fun part starts, as you have a predefined information, or let's say predefined options to retrieve the data. So before we use the HTTP connector, and it was quite difficult, as you notice, because I need to add a lot of strings, read the documentation carefully to get the information. In this case, the connector itself, it allows us to retrieve the data, to input the data using the predefined methods. And if I jump to the ACC Connect, we will try to, for example, get some folder from the project. So if I navigate to ACC Connect, and let's say I want to get some folder from the project, I can use this predefined connector. So in this case, we are not using HTTP, but we are jumping to Autodesk Construction Cloud. And with that, we have the predefined list of actions that are added to this connector. So it allows me to do the custom action if needed. But apart from that, I can also download the objects, get the objects, update the objects, etc. So I will use the get object, and I need to go through my connector. So I need to select my connection. So this is my demo connector that I have just validated. And with that, I want to say, give me the folder that is located on the specific hub. So I want, for example, the delivery services hub, and I select the project name, for example, my some sandbox project. With this one, it tells me all of the different lists of the folders that are available in that project. So I can expand my project files. And as you see, I have already that prepared in the form of the tree. So that helps a lot, right? Normally, you would need to search what is the ID of the folder to check what are the data that you need to retrieve. In this case, it's just a quick drop-down list that I can select this specific folder. And with that, I can get the information from the backend side of the server. So let's test this recipe just to see. Okay, this one was actually the previous one, so I can delete those steps. It doesn't matter anymore. I will save it and test it one more time. And what we will see on selecting the node, again, we see our input. So automatically it converted my hub name, my project name into the IDs of those information, folder name into the folder URL. And as an output, I can see what has been retrieved. So I see that I have retrieved the folder with the specific name, with the information, what is the time that it was created, who created the folder, when it was last time modified, etc. Right? So all of the information about the object that I would like to retrieve. And similar thing, we can also have the information about the input the data. So if I would like to, for example, create the issue, I can use the predefined method to create it. And similar way, like we select the account, select the project, what is the issue type, what's the issue subtype, give it some title. And with that, we will add the data into the cloud. So again, as a quick example, we can see that I will just add another step to this recipe. I will use action in the app and use my Autodesk Construction Cloud. This time, as I have validated before, it automatically uses the right connection. I can create the object in the project, use the object of issue. And again, I need to specify where this issue will be created. So I want it to be in a specific hub in my sandbox project with the issue type, let's say design, subtype also design. All of this one with the red stars I need to provide, right? So I need to provide the issue APS webinar issue. Let's give it a status as open. And the last one are, all of them are optional, so I don't need to fill them all, mostly the ones with the red star. So when I save this and test the recipe, let's see what will be the response from the server. So it doesn't throw me any error, so the issue is created. And now I see all of my input, so what kind of data I have provided, and also what is my output, so what kind of issue ID it is as a confirmation, the issue ID as a display ID. So this is the issue 207. Potentially, I could go to the project itself, navigate to the issues, And I should also see the issue 207 in the project. So we see that this is the webinar issue, and we see that this is the issue with the status open and with the type design as we specified in our API. Similar thing we can do with all of the other objects, so cost objects, RFIs, etc. Right? So depending on the type of the object, we can start creating the different information. And this is a sample scenario, right? But you can also imagine the situation where you, for example, get the Excel document with the list of issues. You get line by line and recreate those issues in the server, right? In the manual process, it would take quite a long time. In the automation process, with this workflow, it would be done within 1 minute or even less, right? Similar part with the updating. So potentially, if I want to update the issue, I could use the previously created issue to, let's say, change something, for example, the status. Again, it has the predefined information or predefined method. So if I navigate, let's collect maybe this issue ID that we would like to modify and input one more step here. So action in the app, Autodesk Construction Cloud. In this case, it will be update the object in the project. And I want to update the issue. I'm selecting the account and project. In this case, to update the issue, I need to provide the issue ID. So I provided from the previous step and was created. And let's say that I will modify this issue from open to in review. If I save it and test the recipe, it runs it for now. Now it's finished. Okay, that gives me some error. So invalid status, open to review, metadata. So that gives me some error in terms of my input. And then there's an error from that request. So potentially I would need to check invalid status transition. Maybe it is something related to this to the setup. Let's try maybe to close this issue as a status. It might be that the status in review is deactivated in the project. Okay, this time it worked, right? So it tells me that I updated the issue. I have my input one more time. In this case, I put it with the status closed. And if I have the output, it tells me that the issue number 207 is closed. So if I navigate back to the project, it is open. When I refresh the page, the issue should be marked as closed. So I need to remove the filters, and we have the status closed as a validation, right? So as you see, it helps quite a lot in terms of building these requests using the predefined methods. In case, unfortunately, there are not all of the methods that are available, right? So in 80% of the cases, I would say, or even more, you still will need to go through the documentation to input the URL and use the custom action of the request. So just to show you in the ACC Connect product, if let's say I'm going to build another step here, I'm connecting to Autodesk Construction Cloud, and let's say I want to get some other information that I cannot see in the predefined list, I can use this custom action, and then we are coming back to specifying the data in using like what kind of method, what kind of path needs to be added from the documentation, what kind of request URLs and response body will be needed. Okay, so yeah, I see that Pat, some message from you. Yeah, I think we can give a short, like 5-minute break before we go to the next step. It's actually the last step in terms of the building the recipes, and see also what is the power of automation here, as we went already through this process of sample API endpoints and understanding how it is structured in ACC Connect. So let's give it a break for, let's say 5 minutes. Maybe let's meet like 10 past 11. And with that, we will continue with the ACC Connect recipes. I will just pause the recording. No questions more. Okay, so one more thing just to trigger the poll at the end, as we have a couple of questions, just to rate and capture the feedback also for our team. If you could respond to 4 quick questions, it's literally 1 minute that we have left, it would be great to capture the feedback from today's session. Okay, meanwhile, we can check the questions. So does Worka2 support offer stable integration nav? Offer stable, yes. So in Worka2, you have quite a lot of tools. As you see, it's a complex topic in terms of the different functionalities. We have also the concept of the lookup tables. So within the toolset, you can navigate to the lookup tables. It's like the CSV tables that gives us like the different information when you can capture the data, search the data, etc. So there is a concept also of the database that you can embed, store the data, reuse it, modify, etc. Yes, as Zafo mentioned, there's also the integration with the SQL server. So apart from the pre-built integrations, you can also use the different connections also to different data sets, right? So it's also something that could help. You could potentially also use and navigate or deviate from this low code functionality more into the coding, like embedding either the Python code, etc. in case you do the much more processing of the data, and it is just easier to do it through the coding system. Okay, let's give a couple of minutes more for the poll. If you have any other questions, feel free also to put them in the chat. I see that there is one open question in the Q&A. So will ACC keep adding such actions or only data management are available? Okay, so in terms of the Autodesk Platform Services documentation, you can find quite a lot of APIs also in the different chapters. So we touched mostly the Autodesk Construction Cloud APIs, but if you come back to the documentation, you can find the documentation focus on for example, the data management. So this is mostly like the documents, working with documents, folders, files, etc. BIM 360 APIs, some of them might be also relevant for ACC. But if you type also the different APIs like building connected and different products, they also get updated, right? So all of the APIs that you use in ACC Connect, they're also derived from the documentation in APS. So if something appears in the APS documentation, you can automatically use it in ACC Connect. So that was answered. Is it possible to move files directly from ACC to SharePoint? Yes, or they should be always downloaded on Worka2. Okay, so yes, you will need to download those files, like to fetch the information and the content. Be mindful that we don't have the limit in terms of the number of files that are downloaded, but there might be the limit in terms of the size, right? So I'm pretty sure that the files that are higher than 2 gigabytes, you will need to maybe make it as a separate call as asynchronous functions, just not to create too long queue. And if the file is huge and the Worka2 servers wouldn't be able to handle that, then probably you will need to report it in some sort of list for the users to move them manually. But yeah, it's always a way that you would need to download the files temporarily first to upload it back to the SharePoint. Regarding the 2 connectors included in the pricing above, do they need to be nominated when ACC Connect is purchased? Well, so those 2 connections are 2 active connections. So be aware of that potentially you could create 10 different connections, but use only 2 of them. And let's say intermittently, if you want to move the data, you can switch the active connection, for example, from SharePoint to OneDrive, because as a one-time action, you want to move the files to OneDrive, right? So they're limited to 2 active connections, and one of them it will be the Autodesk Construction Cloud. The other one it will be any other data source. But as mentioned, like it's active connections, right? So you can always deactivate, create a new connector temporarily, and perform the tasks in case you have some specific automation process. And of course, there's always an option to purchase, additional connections if you see that that will help to finalize the workflow you are working on. Okay, we have a couple of more questions. This one is done. Let me have a look. So in ACC app on Workato, we have downloaded docs, upload docs, calls readily available. These are preloaded in the ACC app. Will Autodesk add more calls like issues, model derivative? Okay, you mean to, okay, I see the question. So the question is about if there will be more predefined calls in the connector. So basically, just to give you a bit more background, so this connector is actually developed by our team that I presented on I think the first slide from the ISE team. So Sofat, Alice, and Benki. They are working also just to make sure that the connector is getting better, but also about the stability, right? So that it gives you quite a bit more power in terms of any changes in the product because they also adapt the connector. So hopefully it will be also like some new custom actions added in the future. To be honest, like from my side, I don't have like too much visibility on the roadmap what will be added in the like short-term map. Okay. When you download the file from SharePoint and upload it to ACC, is a recipe. Where is downloaded document stored? Yes, it is stored within ACC Connect itself, like temporarily, and then it gets removed, right? So it's like we only on the purpose on the recipe workflow, it's just get downloaded locally on this, like it's downloaded to the servers of ACC Connect of Workato, and then they are getting removed. In case you have some questions like from the client perspective in terms of where the data are stored, the ACC Connect are there. We have both instances on US server, but also on the EMEA servers. Can you create a workflow in Workato? How easy it is to have it to export? Okay, yes, in terms of the exporting the recipes, it is possible to export the recipe from one Workato instance to another. It is actually available within the toolset. So there is an option to go to recipe lifecycle management, and you can create a manifest and export it or import it back. So you can create a package that will contain all of your recipes, connectors, etc., and shift them from one environment to another, or import and export and import. Okay, so that one is addressed. This one is also done. Okay, we have one more question. When using the ACC connector, can you specify that you want to listen for the event, like issue created, but you have to select the project? If you have 20 projects, I need 20 recipes. That's a really good question, Jonathan. So event-driven is based on the webhooks coming from the APS. So again, if you type APS webhook events, you can even create your own webhooks, right? Like in terms of the events. So I will send you the link in the chat in terms of events. I don't know. Yeah, in terms of these events passing. Let me have a look. Where's the chat? So there's the webhook events that you can really kind of check what kind of events you have. Like you have also limit quotas. So in terms of the webhook, like you have a lot of different events that are supported, and mostly they're the documents, of course, the cost management events quite a lot. The webhooks for the issues, I think it is coming in the near future. But if you have a lot of different projects, and let's say you don't want to set up the recipe for the different webhook events, what you can do is to switch to a different trigger. So let's say monitor my list of projects and check for the new issues every 5 minutes or every 1 hour. And in this case, you loop your recipe for the number of projects that you have identified in the lookup table or in your database. And then it will be one recipe that loops through multiple projects at the same time. Okay. This one is done. Okay, perfect. So I think we answered most of the questions. This one, I think, in ACC Workato, we have downloaded docs. Okay, this one, I think it was also answered. Okay, perfect. So I think that's all for today's session. Thank you very much for your time. And I know it was quite a high speed because it was a lot of content, but I hope that you enjoyed it anyway. And I hope that you can also watch the recording afterwards and review, like once you review the slide deck one more time, you have like really the data that are compacted all together. So that should also help you to peacefully perform the same task that we did today. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you a great rest of your day.
Okay, thank you.